Hey there, how's it going? Welcome back. I want to show you today how to do event-driven automation in AWS. And the example I'm going to run through is a single database. Then we're going to create a function that will perform snapshots, and then we'll also create automation, a rule that will trigger that snapshot creation every 10 minutes. So this is a very common kind of automation in AWS, and we're going to run through that now. So the first thing we'll do is let's look at some CloudFormation code that I've created. So if you haven't used CloudFormation before, maybe only Terraform, no worries, it's very simple to understand. At the very top we've got a bunch of parameters, and this is similar to variables or TFRs in Terraform. And here I've just got the name of the database, default database username and password, nothing spectacular. And then down here I've got the resource to be made, which is a single resource of type RDS DB instance, and that's an RDS database. We're going to run this on the free tier and keep things really slim, so 20 gigs of storage, single zone US East 1A, free tier instance type DBT3 micro. This is a kind of like an instance name, but it's what they call an instance identifier. So I put some kind of randomized alphanumeric digits in there to make sure that I've definitely got a unique one. Postgres, but it really doesn't matter. And yeah, GP2 I think I mentioned. So that's about it. Very simple, very straightforward. So let's look at the next one. And this here is the code for the snapshotting, and also to make the snapshot run every 10 minutes. So let's tackle the first part. I'm just going to skip the first resource, going to go straight to the Lambda function. This is what performs a snapshot. We're calling this RDS snapshot function. So it's a type Lambda function, and then in here, many people don't know this, but you can actually put your Python or whatever other code it is straight into a CloudFormation template. You don't have to upload those separately as files. You can get it to pretend it's uploading it. That's what this zip file means. So here we're importing Boto 3, which if you don't know is the AWS SDK. And very simple here, we're just saying create a snapshot and use this as the name of the snapshot. By the way, we've done a little computation here to say get the current timestamp using these standard library functions, and then create a new name of the snapshot, which is going to be DB and the unique identifier I already made up, snapshot, and then the timestamp. Don't have to do that, but it's kind of nice to have that. So yeah, create a snapshot and some error handling, return a status code 500 if it's a failure, but if it's successful it should be 200. We've got a runtime of Python 3.9, a timeout of 30 seconds, and a memory size very low, only 128 megabytes. Now, in order for this Lambda function to perform the snapshot, we need to give it some rights, so we're going to create an IAM role that it's going to use. So this is saying that Lambda can assume this, and it will allow it to create snapshots in RDS and also to describe snapshots. So yeah, it's a Lambda execution role. So that's the snapshotting Lambda function, but now we need to run it every 10 minutes. So how do we do that? Well, we need two resources. The first one is what's called a Cloudwatch Events rule. Now, Cloudwatch Events was how it first came out. It's now part of AWS Eventbridge, which is much bigger, more versatile, but it still has this old name, Events rule. We're saying here that every 10 minutes, it's kind of cron type expression, and the target is the Lambda function that we mentioned already above. Now, it also needs a permission, because obviously this rule is going to be applied to the Lambda function, so it needs to be given permission to do that, and that's what this is down here. This is to say that the Eventbridge API needs to be able to invoke a Lambda function, which actually it has this name, and this here is the permission resource that's needed for that to work. So this should be everything that we need. So let's move on now to AWS. And I've already done the CloudFormation because it does take 5 minutes to create the RDS database, even the most simple type, and then it takes a few extra minutes as well in order to create all those other resources. So I've skipped that, nothing really to see there anyway. Here's the database. You can see it was successfully created, and you can see that it's a Postgres, it's a single zone 1A, it's DB-T3 micro, which is just like I asked. So let's move on, nothing else to see here. Now this is a bit more interesting. This is the Lambda function, and what you see here is you can see that there's a Lambda function, which we're going to look at in a second, but you can also see that there's a link there. This shows a nice integration AWS. There's a link to a Cloudwatch Events rule, or part of Eventbridge. So that's pretty cool that it actually shows you that here. That's really, really nice actually. So let's scroll down and take a look at the code, and it's just as we saw before, except obviously it's nicely formatted, a bit more clear that you can see now. Importing the modules, computing the date and time, creating the snapshot, status code 200 or exception 500, and yeah, that's it. Nothing more to see here, but nice to see it here. Let's move on. Okay, now here is the Cloudwatch Events rule, or maybe more accurate, the Amazon Eventbridge rule, and you can see here that it's targeting the snapshot function. It's a type Lambda function because it can target other things. By the way, with Eventbridge, it's not just periodic things every 10 minutes. You can also say if AWS service A does this, then take another service and do this. You know, so if something is triggered in EC2, then you can take action in another service. Let's say, I don't know, Cloudwatch or something like that. So it's very, very powerful. You can do all kinds of interactions. I strongly recommend you go to this page and have a look around. But in our case, you can see that the events rule is targeting that Lambda function, and if I go to event schedule, you can see that it says every 10 minutes you should trigger that Lambda function. Very simple example we're showing here, but you can do so much more in here. And finally, here are the snapshots. So you can see here in this column that they've been running every 10 minutes, 19, 27, 37, 47, 57. And we know that anyway because conveniently I also put it in the snapshot name. You can see the timestamp that I asked it to do. So yeah, that is an example of an AWS automation using AWS or Amazon Eventbridge. Really cool what you can do. You can do all kinds of things. You can take your test servers and turn them off at the weekend automatically, for example, and save money that way. There are loads of things you can do. These look great on your resume, and they'll also be really helpful to your department. Your boss will be impressed, and everybody will be happy. There's so many cool automations that you can do. So hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon. Take care.